Okay, I guess that's it. From members of council? Okay, Mayor Tory to speak.
Well, Madam Speaker, thank you, and thank you to all the members of council for a debate that it's a bit mystifying to me as to how it could have taken this long on what we're doing, and I'll come back to Councillor Carroll's, I think, very apt description of what this was supposed to be about, but I think it's been useful in terms of the exchange of ideas. I want to thank the City Manager, too, and the staff for preparing this report, notwithstanding the very loud words of condemnation coming from across the way. I was actually the person that asked for this report. I wasn't trying to resist it. I initiated asking for it, and I'm glad we got it. The City Manager and I have had some energetic discussions about it, and I intend to continue to show leadership in going forward to produce the results that the report was intended to produce, which is, and this is where I agree with Councillor Carroll, how it could have taken us all day to agree to ask the City Manager to develop a framework for a long-term financial plan is a bit mystifying in terms of how things work, but we all have had our opportunity to speak, including me, and that's for the good, I think, because we've learned from that. And I should say to Councillor Carroll, by the way, whatever I said at the Executive Committee then or any other time, I never intend any offence. And I know people have looked before for efficiencies in the city government. I just think sometimes there's a sense, and taken directly from the words of some others, perhaps not yourself, that we should stop looking for efficiencies because there aren't any more to be found and so forth and so on. And some people even interpret Mr. Wallace's report as being to that end, and I fundamentally disagree with that. And the other thing that Councillor Carroll said that was, I thought, wise was that today was not the day. I'm not sure any day is, but today is not the day to be identifying sacred cows, so-called, to use her words. I think there's been a bit of that, and that's one of the reasons why I will not support some of these motions. I will not support the motion of Councillor Matlow, respectfully. I don't think it adds anything. I will not support either of the motions of Councillor Wong Tam. I will support the motion of Councillor Campbell with respect to looking at some means of alternate service delivery. Why is that? Well, I guess because I just believe that the great thing about this report is that it is honest, and a number of people have used that word today. And it's honest, and it puts on the table a real conundrum for us, because we do, as a number have said, including some of the last speakers, want to build a great city. We want to build a great city that has all the attributes of a great city, including public transportation and proper housing and the kind of compassion and caring that will help us to produce greater social justice and the prosperity that we need to produce that. But we don't, at the present time, have the financial framework that would allow us to do that. In fact, we're quite hamstrung in that regard. And so one of the things that I think we have to be sort of honest and open-minded about is that we have to be able to look at all the options, a full range of options in resolving that. And it's the first time I think I've heard Councillor Perruzza get up and say he agreed with anything that I said, which is great. There's always a step forward on a new day. But the fact is, when people try to make it a black or white choice of whether we have a spending problem, as they say, or a revenue problem, call it whatever you want. I prefer to look at those both as a challenge, but we have challenges on both sides. And that is simply why I cannot accept and do not accept and will not accept the fact that we've wrung every ounce of inefficiency out of this government. You know, for all the talk people have had this afternoon about going to talk to constituents and going through the property tax bill, I guarantee you, if you ask those very same people, including the ones in Councillor McConnell's ward who say they'd pay more taxes, do you think every ounce of inefficiency has been wrung out of that city government? 90% of those people would say no. And you know what? We know they're right. And when Councillor Holliday was talking earlier on about the reference to Groundhog Day and that we're asking these questions over and over again about optimization of assets, we had that discussion last year or the year before. And besides which, if we ever really considered that, dogs would start running around in circles chasing their tails and the sun wouldn't come up. We can't do that. High efficiency, high excellence, accountable organizations ask those questions over and over and over again. Even when it's boring to ask them, even when you answered the question last year, that was last year. That was last year. Now is when it is, and we're in front of a situation the city manager has very expertly described to us. And I have said, for my part, well, I've said some things that I don't back away from, and I got elected saying those things with respect to what I think we should or should not do with property taxes. I have been willing to put forward the proposition that we have a modest levy through the property tax to finance the beginnings of the city building fund. I am not advocating a freeze and did not on property taxes. We are having an inflation or below increase. But others will say, no, we can't possibly look at optimizing assets, or we can't possibly look at expenditure reductions, or we can't possibly look at alternate service delivery, because the sun won't come up, or the day won't start, or the government will grind to a halt, or people will go into a decline. We cannot do that in this instance. This is an exercise where we're going to have to be open-minded, and we're going to have to look at all of these things. That's, I think, what we're asking the city manager to do, because that's what good organizations do. They put aside the fact they've asked and answered questions before, and they keep asking them to see if they can get a better answer. And so I just hope that really it's not about today, it's about what's going to happen from today forward, and that the city manager, I think, has had some helpful advice, I'm sure, today in going forward to establish that framework and bring us back some measures. And I'm honest enough to say, and I get criticized for it, on the revenue side, if we want to build the city, and especially in terms of the capital projects, we are going to need to find other revenues to do it, because there aren't any right now. If we're going to look people in the eye and say to them, we need to get this revenue from you to build subways and build housing and produce social justice in the city, we're going to have to contain expenditures as well. I generally think that either a committee chair or the last speaker gets that 1 extra minute, which is all I took, and I was concluding, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
Okay. We do have a question for you. Councillor Perks.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Mr. Mayor, did I hear you correctly? We should consider all options?
Yes.
Yeah? And we should be open-minded?
Yes.
We shouldn't take any options off the table?
That's right.
Except keeping property taxes below inflation?
No, I mean, if you said freeze property taxes and don't even consider a raise in property taxes, but I've specifically come forward since I have been the mayor and said that I would agree to, and in fact proposed, a modest levy done through the property tax to finance the first parts of the city building fund, and have not and never did advocate a freeze in property taxes. And inflation only increased because I believe in my heart that there are people out there, notwithstanding all of what you say about the great joy people take in coming to your office and telling you they want to pay more. I don't meet a lot of those people, to be quite honest with you. I do meet a lot of seniors. I met the man at the Carpenters Hall not too long ago and told me that a lot of his pension check, the biggest single check he writes each year, is his property tax check, and that if that continues to get much bigger, he's going to be out of his house. And I actually meet a lot of people who tell me that, and so I've already shown some willingness and flexibility with respect to property taxes by actually proposing the levy for the city building fund. And so I've not heard any such flexibility from you whatsoever on optimizing assets, on expenditure. I've never heard you stand in this chamber, and I've only been here a year and a half. I've never heard you stand up and propose an expenditure reduction of any kind. They're usually condemned as being an offence against something or other, and I've not heard you get up and talk in favour of alternate service delivery. So I think if we're talking about who's flexible here, I've shown a degree of flexibility on this that does mean all options have been on the table.
Yes, it is unfortunate you've only been here a year and a half, because you would have seen the work I did on Budget Committee when Councillor Carroll was the budget chief. We took $150 million out every year, 4 years consecutively. But the question I asked you wasn't about whether you were freezing property taxes. The question I asked you is, given that you've said we should look at all options, we should be open-minded,
Councillor Mamalidi,
and
please.
we should, just a moment, I'm curious why you have prima facie taken off the table the notion of increasing property taxes above inflation to meet the operating challenges that the city manager talked about.
I've already told you that I have indicated, I believe, at least I've demonstrated some degree of flexibility on something that I think is a very sensitive matter, certainly in the context of the mandate that I received from the people in the election. You have not heard me say with respect to any other revenue measure. I've had some past statements I've made with respect to road tolls that are on the record, but with respect to all of the other measures, I haven't. So I guess I've ruled out, if you say that I've ruled out any further increases in property taxes beyond the annual increase I have allowed for and beyond the levy that will go to the city building fund, if you say that I've taken that off the table, I will say to you that's a lot fewer things that I've taken off the table. If you want to say that's what I've done, then you have.
Well, we'll just have to see how the vote goes then. Thank you.
We should take it off the table.
Thank you.
Complete.
Our next motion is motion 7A by Councillor Wong Tam. Recorded vote. Yes, when we do the next one, then we'll do it separate. It's separate. There's two motions. Yeah. 7B is the one that Councillor Jamari that you don't vote on. We'll ask you to leave.
Councillor Kelly, please. Councillor Karygiannis.
Councillor Robinson and Councillor Crisanti, please.
Motion 7A does not carry. The vote is 19 to 24.
Motion 7B, Councillor Aljamari, if you want to, you have an interest in this one. Recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
Councillor Crisanti and Councillor Palacio, please.
Motion 7B does not carry. On a tie vote, 21 aside.